George Clooney is not someone who quietly disappears from anything. He has spent 3 decades in public life being the opposite of subtle. Politically vocal, publicly committed, willing to put his name on positions and people in front of cameras when most of his peers would manage their risks more carefully. His career across film, philanthropy, and political engagement is full of moments where he chose the harder option and said the thing that cost something.
I do love the fact that it is the Clooneys that are now delivering Harry and Meghan a taste of their own medicine. They're being ghosted. See how it feels? Not very nice, is it? But incredibly well deserved.
When staying quiet would have been considerably easier and professionally safer. In 2019, he compared the media treatment of Meghan to the coverage that preceded Diana's death. He called it unfair, in plain and unambiguous language, in front of the cameras. He did not hedge it or soften it. He used the word that matters most to Harry, Diana, and he attached it to an argument about what was being done to Meghan. That was not a casual celebrity endorsement. That was a man putting his reputation on the line because he had concluded the situation required it. 6 years later, according to multiple reports, he is no longer in the picture in any observable way.
Breaking today, shocking new details have emerged about why George and Amal Clooney ditched Prince Harry and Meghan Markle.
No public fallout, no interview where he explains the distance, no dramatic confrontation that anyone can point to as the defining moment when things changed. The friendship that looked, at its peak, like one of the most significant celebrity alliances of the post-royal era, appears to have simply, and very quietly, dissolved. And according to sources cited in recent reporting, Harry never saw it coming, which may be the detail that makes the whole story most painful for him. Tonight, we are going through the full Clooney story, how the friendship formed and what it represented at its peak, what the 2019 defense of Meghan actually cost Clooney and why it mattered.
Because you can just imagine, Tash, they are really the ones that tend to ghost people. So the fact that they are now being ghosted is really interesting to me.
What the King's Trust appearance in 2023 signaled about the direction of the Clooneys' own institutional navigation. What the apparent cooling of this particular relationship says about the broader question of where the Sussex celebrity network actually stands in 2025. 6 years after the departure that was supposed to open every door in Hollywood and demonstrate that the California chapter was going to be better than the royal one. And the specific question that sits underneath all of it, when the most publicly committed celebrity defender of the Sussex position appears to have quietly withdrawn, what does that communicate about the overall picture? Let's start at the wedding, because that is where the Clooney connection became publicly visible.
Really impacted Prince Harry. He thought he was going to be boys with Clooney for life, and then the couple ditched him for the real royals.
May 2018, St. George's Chapel. The guest list for Harry and Meghan's wedding was genuinely extraordinary. One of those rare events where the density of famous names in a single room was a story in its own right. George and Amal Clooney attended. At the time, their presence carried a specific weight that went beyond celebrity. The Clooneys were not simply famous, they were among the most globally influential couples in the world. George, through decades of film, philanthropy, and political engagement that regularly brought him into contact with heads of state and international institutions. Amal, through her career as an international human rights lawyer working on cases connected to war crimes, genocide, and press freedom at the highest levels. Their attendance was not the attendance of people chasing proximity to fame. It was the attendance of people who were already operating in a world where the royal family represented one institution among many that they navigated professionally and socially. Their presence at the wedding communicated something specific. The Sussexes had arrived at the very highest level of the global elite, not just the entertainment world. Months after the wedding, Harry and Meghan were reportedly invited to George Clooney's villa on Lake Como, one of the most private and coveted addresses in the world among the extremely wealthy and influential. The villa is not a place celebrities go to be photographed. It is a place people go when they want to be genuinely out of the public eye. Being invited there represented a depth of connection that went well beyond having attended the same event.
A friendship which had actually got remarkably close, even though they had, quite wisely, I would say, from the Clooneys' side of things, never been pictured publicly with Harry and Meghan. Yes, there they were turning up at the wedding. Quite rightly, they never got that public picture.
Then in 2019, as Meghan faced sustained and increasingly intense media scrutiny during her pregnancy, Clooney went public with his support. He drew the parallel to Diana directly, and he did it in plain language. He said the press was repeating the same thing it had done before, driving a woman to the same end. That is not a careful celebrity hedge dressed up as support. That is a direct and deliberate statement from someone who knew exactly what weight those words carried and chose to carry them publicly anyway. For Harry, those words must have meant something beyond what most public support could reach. Clooney had connected the treatment of Meghan to the events that ended his mother's life. He had done it in front of the cameras. He had put his name on it. If there was one moment that should have demonstrated the friendship was durable, was built on something real rather than on the prestige of a wedding invitation, that was it. If Palace Insider is giving you the full picture that other channels skip, hit the like button. It costs nothing and helps us keep doing this. So what happened? The answer, to the extent there is a public answer, is that nobody knows with certainty. Neither George nor Amal Clooney has publicly addressed the reported cooling. Harry and Meghan have not spoken about it directly. What is observable is what stopped being visible. After Harry and Meghan relocated to California in 2020, the public signs of the Clooney friendship did not increase. They decreased and then disappeared entirely.
This is so mortifying for Harry and Meghan.
No joint appearances, no photographs together in any public setting, no major events attended as couples, no mutual acknowledgements of the kind that celebrities routinely use to signal ongoing relationships, the casual tag, the congratulatory comment, the appearance in each other's social media orbit that communicates continued closeness without requiring a formal statement. The Lake Como era and the 2019 defense of Meghan became the high-water mark of the public friendship. Everything after was silence, a silence that grew louder as the Sussex controversies multiplied and each one passed without Clooney's voice being attached to it. According to reporting that has circulated across royal commentary and entertainment outlets in the period since, Harry made attempts to reconnect over the years. The picture that emerged from those reports was of communication becoming gradually more difficult to maintain, messages going unanswered for extended periods, meetings and events discussed but never materialized, interactions when they did occur described as polite but carrying none of the warmth of the earlier period. Not hostile, not confrontational, just empty in the specific way that a relationship becomes empty when one side has made a decision and the other side has not yet received the explanation. That specific texture, the slow fade rather than the rupture, is described in multiple accounts as what made it particularly difficult for Harry to process. A public feud can be addressed. A misunderstanding can be corrected. A falling out can generate its own resolution if both parties want one. When someone you trusted simply becomes unavailable without any stated reason, there is nothing to respond to and no clear path to finding out what happened. The friendship simply becomes, over time, a fact in the past tense. What makes the Clooney cooling specifically significant, as opposed to the cooling of other celebrity relationships from the wedding era, is that George Clooney had been the most visible and most public defender. He had set a standard of loyalty in 2019 that made his subsequent silence louder than most people's silence would have been. When someone has publicly connected the treatment of your wife to the death of your mother and then stops being in contact, the absence carries a weight that a more casual acquaintance's absence could not. Subscribe to Palace Insider and tell us in the comments, do you think the Clooneys made a calculated decision, or did the friendship simply run its natural course? Now, let's talk about the King's Trust, because the 2023 King's Trust Awards appearance is the moment that crystallized the symbolic dimension of this story in a way that was very difficult to ignore. By the time George and Amal attended that event, the public Sussex narrative had moved through multiple major chapters. The Oprah interview in 2021, the Netflix documentary in 2022, Harry's memoir Spare at the start of 2023, which generated global headlines and significantly escalated the institutional tensions. Each chapter had produced fresh controversy. Each one had put specific claims about specific family members into the permanent public record. The memoir in particular was extraordinary in its specificity. Private conversations, personal grievances, characterizations of family members that were now available to anyone with a bookshop account. Into that context stepped George and Amal Clooney, appearing at a major event connected to King Charles's charitable work, not at a Sussex event, not at a premiere of anything connected to Harry and Meghan, at the King's Trust Awards, a prestigious and visible occasion directly linked to the institution Harry had spent the previous 3 years characterizing in his public work as an institution that had failed and harmed him. The Clooneys made no statement about the Sussexes in connection with that appearance. They did not explain their presence in terms of any shift in allegiance. They simply attended an event they presumably found worthwhile, shook hands with people they knew, and went about their lives. That is entirely unremarkable behavior for a couple who moved through international philanthropic and institutional circles. But royal commentators did not need a statement. The symbolism of the choice was visible, and it was noted. While Harry was publicly characterizing the royal family as an institution that had caused him profound harm, one of the celebrity couples he had reportedly considered close friends was attending a prestigious event associated with his father, the king. The contrast was not subtle, and it was not ignored. Whether the Clooneys intended that contrast or simply made an independent decision about a worthwhile event, the effect on the public narrative surrounding the Sussex celebrity network was significant. It became one of the clearest data points in a reading of the situation that had been developing across multiple sources for several years, that the Hollywood figures who once appeared to orbit the Sussexes were making different calculations about where their public associations should be pointing. Now let's put the Clooney story in its wider context, because it does not exist in isolation. The wedding guest list in 2018 included names across entertainment, sport, and media that generated their own headlines when announced. David Beckham attended alongside Victoria. Idris Elba DJ'd the reception. Serena Williams gave a speech at the celebration afterward. The density of famous faces created a specific impression of the Sussexes at what looked like the peak of their influence. A couple who had successfully connected the worlds of royalty and Hollywood, who had access to everyone, who were building something culturally significant that would only grow. 6 years on, the observable picture is considerably different from that impression. David Beckham's name in 2024 and 2025 is more likely to appear in coverage of King Charles, William and Catherine, or the broader royal charitable orbit than in coverage connected to Harry and Meghan. Reports of tensions around the Invictus Games, specifically around Beckham traveling to an event and finding the warmth he expected was not there, have circulated persistently enough across multiple sources to become part of the accepted narrative about the cooling of that relationship. Idris Elba's public professional connections to charitable organizations and royal initiatives linked to the monarchy remain visible in his contemporary coverage. His public connection to Harry and Meghan is not generating significant contemporary coverage. Serena Williams, once described as Meghan's most genuine and enduring celebrity friendship, someone whose public loyalty had been tested and appeared real, has gone noticeably quiet in the most recent period of the Sussex story. And Oprah, who represents the apex of this conversation and whose involvement with the Sussexes was more visible and more consequential than almost anyone else on the wedding guest list, has not chosen Meghan's children's book for her book club. She has not publicly attached herself to any significant subsequent Sussex project. Paula Froelic's characterization of the current Oprah dynamic, close enough to stay connected to the story if something major develops, far enough away to avoid being pulled into the ongoing fallout, is the assessment of someone who covers this beat with good sourcing and no obvious axe to grind in either direction. The pattern, when you look at it across these multiple cases, is not that every single celebrity from the wedding circle has made a deliberate and calculated decision to move toward the royal family and away from the Sussexes. That reading would be too neat, too coordinated, and too conspiracy-shaped to be accurate. Individual celebrities make individual decisions for individual reasons. Not all of those reasons are the same. What the pattern actually shows is something more specific and, in some ways, more telling than a coordinated decision. The celebrities who were once most publicly associated with the Sussexes are simply no longer generating public associations with the Sussexes. The connection that once defined how they were perceived in relation to each other has stopped being visible. There are no joint appearances being covered. There are no public acknowledgments being made. There is no contemporary evidence of the kind of active social relationship that generates the coverage that celebrity friendships normally generate when they are functioning. For the Sussexes, that evaporation is a different kind of problem than a public falling out. A public falling out is a story with two sides, and two-sided stories always generate coverage that can be engaged with and navigated. The quiet disappearance of connection does not give you anything to push back against. It simply leaves you with a guest list from 2018 that looks considerably different from the social world that surrounds you in 2025, and no clear mechanism for changing the picture. There is also the question of what the Clooney relationship was built on and whether that foundation was structurally capable of surviving what followed the wedding. Many commentators have made the point that the 2018 wedding was not simply a social gathering between established friends. It was one of the most prestigious ceremonial events of the decade, the kind of occasion that generates invitations connected to status, occasion, and institutional prestige rather than exclusively to deep prior friendship. George and Amal Clooney did not have a long-established friendship with Harry and Meghan before 2018. They were not childhood friends, nor were they people who had navigated years of shared experience together. Their attendance was part of a guest list that combined genuine long-standing personal connections with people invited because the scale and cultural significance of the occasion made their presence appropriate and mutually valuable. That is not a criticism of the Clooneys or of Harry and Meghan. It is simply an honest description of what a royal wedding of that scale is. A cultural event as much as a personal celebration, one that generates its own social dynamics, and one where the guest list reflects both personal affection and the prestige of the occasion in proportions that only the people inside it can fully know. In that context, the friendship that developed in the months and years after, the Lake Como visit, the public defense of Meghan, was genuinely meaningful, precisely because it went further than the occasion required. Clooney did not have to speak out in 2019. He chose to. In that context, the friendship that followed, the Lake Como visit, Clooney's 2019 defense of Meghan, was impressive and meaningful precisely because it went further than the occasion required. It suggested that what had begun as a prestigious social connection had developed into something with real loyalty behind it. But the subsequent years tested that loyalty in ways that the 2019 defense could not have anticipated. The Oprah interview, the Netflix documentary, Harry's memoir Spare. These were not small escalations in the Sussex story. They were major commercial and public interventions, each one adding to a public record of claims about specific family members, each one keeping the Sussex story in a state of continuous controversy and generating cycles of coverage that put everyone around the Sussexes in the position of either engaging or conspicuously not engaging. The Clooneys, whose brand is built on prestige, stability, carefully cultivated institutional relationships, and a specific kind of global credibility that takes years to build, were navigating all of that without publicly distancing themselves from the Sussexes, but also without publicly re-engaging. They did not criticize. They did not defend. They stayed still. And in the space of that stillness, the friendship, if it was still functioning, became invisible. The silence, as George Clooney's own track record demonstrates, was itself a statement with a specific weight. A man who speaks out publicly when he cares about something, and who has done so repeatedly throughout his career on issues ranging from genocide in Darfur to press freedom to political corruption, chose not to speak out during any of the Sussex controversies that followed his 2019 defense of Meghan. Not during the Oprah interview fallout, not during the Netflix documentary coverage, not during the publication of Spare, not during any of the legal battles. That choice, to stay publicly silent during a period when the people he had previously defended were generating enormous controversy, is its own form of communication. George Clooney staying silent about something he cares about is not a pattern his career supports. George Clooney staying silent about something he has moved past is a pattern that is entirely consistent with who he is and how he operates. What the Clooney story ultimately represents in the wider picture of Harry's post-royal life is something specific and uncomfortable. The possibility that the Hollywood relationships which looked most durable in 2020 were built on a foundation that required the continuation of certain conditions to hold. The conditions changed. The relationships did not survive the change. Harry moved to California, expecting Hollywood to represent a permanent and stable alternative to the royal world he had left. The assumption was reasonable on its face. Hollywood is full of people who understand public scrutiny, who navigate complex institutional relationships, and who have the cultural and financial resources to maintain connections across complicated terrain. It seemed like a world that would welcome the Sussexes on their own terms. What that assumption may not have fully accounted for is that Hollywood relationships carry their own specific logic, one that is partly about genuine personal connection, partly about brand alignment, and partly about what the costs and benefits of proximity look like at any given moment. The Clooneys are not simply celebrities who happen to be famous. They are people with a carefully managed global presence, active institutional relationships with the kind of organizations that matter to them professionally and philanthropically, and a strong incentive to be precise about where their public associations point. The Clooneys' appearance at the King's Trust Awards was not necessarily a deliberate move against Harry. There is no evidence it was intended as a statement. It was, in all probability, simply an event they found worthwhile, attended on its own merits, and considered no further than that. But it demonstrated something that the Sussex move to California may not have fully prepared Harry for, that the celebrities he expected to become his network were simultaneously maintaining their own networks, and those networks had not reorganized themselves around the Sussex arrival. Hollywood did not move to Montecito. The Sussexes moved to Hollywood. And in Hollywood, the people who define the social architecture, who sets the terms, who gets the invitations, who controls the symbolic capital of the room, are the people who were already there before you arrived, and who will still be there after you leave. The friendship that began in 2018 with a wedding invitation and deepened through a Lake Como visit and a public defense of Meghan in front of the cameras was real at the time it existed. The observable evaporation of that friendship is also real. By every measurable public indicator, it has not persisted in any visible form into 2025. What happened between those two data points? What specific sequence of events or decisions or gradual drifts brought the friendship from its 2019 peak to its current absence is known only to the people inside it. What it demonstrates publicly is something the Sussex story has been illustrating in various forms for several years now. That the social and professional architecture Harry and Meghan built around their post-royal identity, impressive as it looked when they were building it, has not proven as durable as it appeared when the first bricks were being laid. The celebrity relationships that were supposed to form the foundation of the post-royal chapter have one by one stopped generating the kind of visible evidence that foundations normally provide. The Clooneys were supposed to be one of the load-bearing walls of that architecture. George's 2019 defense of Meghan was supposed to be the kind of public commitment that endures. The Lake Como invitation was supposed to be the kind of gesture that cements something. By every observable measure, they appear to no longer be in the building. Which theory do you find most convincing? A deliberate recalibration by the Clooneys, a natural drift driven by the accumulated weight of Sussex controversies, or simply two people whose friendship ran its course in a compressed period of extraordinary public pressure? There is no version of this story with a clean answer, and anyone telling you there is has picked a side rather than read the evidence. Drop your honest take in the comments below. We genuinely read them, and the debate on this topic is always good. Subscribe to Palace Insider so you never miss what we cover next. And if this kind of deep analysis is what you come here for, the like button is how this channel keeps doing it. We will see you when the next one lands. The story is always moving. We will be here when it does.